Hello and welcome to Sasquatch Talk. My name is Bradley Valentine, and today we have our 15th episode. So we're on a roll. On the top right of your screen, you see Dan Adams. At the bottom, you have Troy Miller. We are the owners of Sasquatch Gun Oil. We're here to talk about whatever we want every week. This year, we're talking a little nuclear energy. So before we get started, however, I have a little jumping off point for us, just a little icebreaker. So last week we talked about cars. This week we were talking about energy when it comes to nuclear. I want to know what sort of energy gets you started in the morning, i.e. what are your, not vices, but the things you don't need that you drink every morning. I'll start with you, Dan. Maybe it's something you eat or drink. Those, coffee energy drinks. What do you got, Dan? And be specific. We want to hear what Dan has.
All right, so today I'm just drinking coffee, right? I got a little tiny splash of creamer, but often I use some lion's mane mushroom powder and mix into it. And sometimes I do lion's mane mushroom powder and create like mono something creatine, and I mix those both into my coffee.
What is what is the mushroom powder? What is that?
Lion's mane mushroom powder. It's for like it helps with your nerves and stuff.
Oh.
So after COVID, I couldn't smell for a long time, like 2 years or something crazy like that. Troy remembers seeing me go through a lot of that, and people just feel like the house could have been burning down, and I'm like, if we're just going by smell, I'm gonna burn up in here. So the lion's mane, taking that every 3 days, it stimulates nerve regrowth, and it helped my smell to start to come back. So I can smell quite a few different things now. So that's been a pretty cool thing to use. The odd thing about it is that I can only use it about 3 days in a row, or like all the seams on any shirt that I'm wearing start to drive me up the wall.
Oh, that's funny.
Yeah, I'll call it overstimulated.
Sure. That's funny. Troy, I'm going to go next, but Troy, I think you're on mute, so I'll give you some time to unmute yourself while I go. I drink, not every morning, but I drink Monsters. I don't drink coffee. I just don't like the taste of it. For anyone wondering, everyone's always like, oh, how can you drink energy drinks? There's so much coffee or caffeine. There's about the same amount of caffeine per ounce in a brewed coffee as an energy drink, but the difference is people drink like several cups of coffee every day. And if you have like a cold brew coffee, that actually has more caffeine than an energy drink. So if anyone's wondering and anyone wants to give me crap about how unhealthy it is, first of all, I drink the sugar-free one. Second, it has less caffeine than many coffees, or at the worst, the same amount. So if anyone's wondering, I hear that every time. Like, I'll have my friends come over and they'll be like, how can you drink that? Aren't you just wired? I'm like, you have like 4 cups of coffee. That's double the caffeine I had. So yeah, it's about the same caffeine as like a hot cup of coffee. It's less than cold coffee. So
yeah, it's not like you're washing your white Monster down with a bang.
Yeah, right. Well, then things would start to get crazy. All right, Troy, you're up. What about you?
My morning routine that gets me started, honestly, coffee.
Yeah.
But I'm a bit of a chocolate addict.
Oh.
And I have a chocolate supply and slash sugar. So sometimes it's more sugar in my coffee than really what's recommended.
Sure.
But I'll have just a lot of pieces of chocolate, whatever it is, whether it's a bag of M&Ms or I have a big bag of M&Ms. I'll just go in for a handful and just eat it out of the hand. Or like Reese's cups and just chocolate, just anything chocolate with my coffee. I always have to have at least 1 glass of water though before I do anything. That's to kind of like rehydrate from waking up.
Yeah.
But so water technically is the very first thing, but to get me started is the chocolate and the coffee.
Nice. It's funny.
Yeah.
as we know, as most people know, like caffeine's a diuretic. So like, like if we ever go on road trips and it's early, like your stomach's feeling weird and like you get up early. And so I'm like, well, I need an energy drink. Then you have to stop at the bathroom before you get in the highway. Anytime we go on trips, it's always like an extra half an hour before we start going because we're like stopping,
Yeah.
getting breakfast, getting caffeine, and then we have to go to the bathroom. So yeah, anyways, that's our story. That's what we drink. Coffee, candy for Troy, and a white energy or white monster for me. So, all right,
That's funny.
we're going to get started with nuclear energy. And we talked about cars last weekend. We talked about the combustion engine versus electric cars. I want to get started with nuclear energy. And I'll start with you, Troy. What would
Yeah.
you assume the world, not just us, right? Not just people we know, but when people look at something like nuclear energy, what do you think they think about it? Like they see it and they think, I like it, I love it, I don't understand it, it's good, it's bad. What is the common
I,
perception?
I think a lot of it's fear, especially those who aren't nuclear scientists, who aren't in the energy industry, who aren't producing energy. Especially politicians and people unrelated to it. I think a lot of it you see and the way you hear them talk is fear.
Yeah.
They're fearful about the mess, well, the nuclear meltdown, the sicknesses, the radiation, the cancers and this and that. Even ignoring all of the statistics that nuclear is far safer than,
Yeah.
we were talking before, walking to the mail to grab your mail. Um, uh,
Yeah.
and that's so there was a facility up in Washington State. I think it was called Hartford. Not sure, but they built the cooling towers and they never brought it online because of that fear. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, you could drive through that town and you see the cooling towers, but it never produced any kind of energy. And I
Huh.
believe it was the political fear from the state leaders.
Yeah. I think fear's an interesting way to put it, and misunderstanding is an interesting way to
Mm-hmm,
put it. And
mm-hmm.
I'll throw it to you in a second, Danny. But when you talk
Mhm.
about the cooling towers, these are the big towers
Yeah.
that
Yeah, what
release.
everybody thinks of when you think of a nuclear power plant, they don't. They think of the rods and the big giant smokestacks,
Right.
but it's
Yeah.
not smoke.
Right. So
Smokestacks.
I'm going to show a picture. I'll put it on for our viewers. And this is from Duke Energy. And you can see what looks like smoke. And the three of us know this, but that's water vapor. Essentially,
Yeah.
what a
Hmm.
nuclear plant is, it uses the hot rods to warm up heat water, and that water spins and creates energy. So everything
Yeah.
that
Like
comes out is
coal.
water vapor. It's not,
Yeah.
it's not
Yeah, that
pollution.
water spins, that steam spins a turbine
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
to generate. Yeah.
So
It's the same way coal works.
yeah,
You
and
burn
people
it,
don't
get hot,
understand
boil
that.
water.
Like people think that it just releases all this pollution. Now, we'll get into it. There are problems with how to store it and what we do with the waste, but
Yeah,
we're
the
just getting
byproducts.
started. So, Danny, what about you? What do you think the normal person thinks when they think of nuclear?
Maybe they grew up in the 80s and watched The Simpsons every night, right? And it's just like
Yeah.
weirdness, three-eyed fish. They've got these big ponds that they draw the water from. You think of like heavy water and how it's like gonna destroy the environment
Yeah.
around it. And there's there's a lot of negative connotations, but when you start reading about it, you start thinking like, well, why aren't we doing this?
Yeah.
Which
Hmm.
all this is eventually going to lead into why we're talking about it and how our entire podcast goes into like, do you really know what you know,
Right.
right? Or is it all a mystery? Like you can think about Sasquatch and how there's just lore, like tons
Yeah.
of lore, and like people go on about their day without a second thought. Like you flip on a light switch and it's supposed to happen. You open your refrigerator and it's supposed to be cold, right? You go to start your car and it's supposed to start up.
Uh-huh.
So, you know, things get a little different when that action doesn't have the result you're expecting, right?
Yeah.
So, there's not a lot of thought process that goes into how those things happen.
Yeah. I want to get into this. What I wanted to understand going into this week was, when did the overall fear start when it came to nuclear energy? So, if you look at countries, what is it, like Germany, they've essentially gotten rid of
France.
all their
Oh,
nuclear power. And the reason why they've done that is because they fear it, right? So I was like, what happened to make people fear nuclear energy? And we can go from there because there's a lot. There's the 3 Mile Island meltdown in
Hmm.
Pennsylvania in 1979. There's Chernobyl disaster in 1986. There's Fukushima in 2011, which was from
Hmm.
what, a tsunami that had a nuclear
earthquake.
The
meltdown. But there's also, what's that movie with Jane Fonda, The China Syndrome, with Jane Fonda and Michael Douglas. That happened right around the same time as the 3 Mile Island meltdown.
yeah,
And so, Danny, you talked about like The Simpsons, right? And
yeah,
you don't have to be from the 80s. The Simpsons is still going today. I just watched a newer
yeah.
episode, and there's always there's like in one of the newer episodes, there's these giant slugs, and a guy falls down into like the sewers, and there's a giant nuclear reactive slug. Anyway, so it's still going on today. But I think what happened is there were a couple of meltdowns, which are sort of small ecological disasters. And we'll get
Hmm.
into the numbers of like deaths and things like that. They're big news, they're disasters, they're meltdowns, right? And then there's TV, right? Like there's movies, there's
Hmm.
bad movies, and that's where it comes from. So I'll stick with you, Dan, but like, do you think people are as influenced by real life versus the movies, or what do you think people's minds are thinking about?
Well, if there's so like in the 50s and the 60s, it was the atomic age, right? And it
Mm-hmm.
was coming about when people were first starting to learn about it, and everything was going to be electric, and it was going to be so
Right.
much easier because, all of the things that you used to have to do, like carry firewood in and, work really hard to make a light switch come on. There's a lot of things that people do today that same action to get that same result 30, 40 years ago would have taken you a better part of the morning to get to,
Hmm.
Sure.
you know? And uh, I think that just like how our podcast a couple of weeks ago, we talked about media bias and like um, Mockingbird and like how Operation Mockingbird and how a lot of the media is controlled to get people to think in one direction or the other. Um, to answer your question, I think the media plays a much larger part than any of us understand, right? Because even though I think that MSR, molten salt reactor technology, is the way to go, it still took me reading about it for weeks before I was like, how do we know it's not going to just blow up? Like, sure, there's passive containment, and sure, it's safer,
Yeah.
but then I'm like, what about the waste? What about this? What about, like, are we going to have Yucca Mountain 3.0 and like
Yeah.
store all the salt blocks from all the, like, did we're going to have to go back? They made everybody think that like lead and stuff is horrible for you, but there's tons of war veterans walking around with chunks of lead inside them and they're not dying from lead poisoning. So, like, because it has to be metabolized in your stomach and processed through ingestion to get
Sure.
lead poisoning, um, because it has to be broken down by your body. Just merely touching lead and having lead be even inside your skin doesn't give you lead poisoning. Um, I'm just using that as a comparative, right? Like lead paint is bad because kids eat lead paint chips, so we can't paint things with lead, right? And like, um, it's a really funny read if you look at like why lead paint actually isn't bad, which is hilarious. But like it just became this synonymous like thing that everybody kind of like, oh, it's bad, you can't have it. But it's not
Right.
like putting stuff off. It actually, here's the ironic part about that. If your whole house was painted in lead paint and your room's on the inside, the amount of uh, RF radiation, radio frequency radiation that's happening with all the cell phone towers and like
Yeah, yeah.
EMF from power lines and everything would
Yeah.
actually be diminished by half, and you would sleep like twice as good as you do now.
That's funny.
That's
That's funny.
a
Let
whole nother episode
Yeah.
though for us is RF radiation.
Okay, Troy, I'll go to you and tell me some more what you think. Like, I like this idea of like people's misconceptions. Um, I'll throw out some numbers here, and these are some charts we looked at, Troy. But nuclear power is about 43 times less likely to produce a death than hydropower, right? That's just pure water spinning turbines, even though that's what nuclear power is. It's about 1,000 times less likely than coal or brown coal, burning brown coal, which is like our main source, right? It's about, I think, like 85, 90 times less likely than gas power. So people don't understand this, and I'll put this chart in our, in the comments for, or in the details for our podcast, so that way you can see it. It doesn't kill a lot of people, which seems weird, right? Like that's what we're measuring. But Troy, you mentioned it off camera about walking, how walking kills more people than nuclear energy. But what do you think it is about, like, do you think it's just people are afraid of a meltdown, or they just have bad information? What do you think it is when it comes to nuclear power?
It could be all of that. It could be bad information. It's the fear is a big proponent of it. Maybe too, also the sheer cost financially wise to build a facility. Like they're not inherently cheap to build
Okay.
compared to, you know, putting out a bunch of wind turbines or a solar system or maybe a coal
Well,
power
it's
plant.
it's cheaper than a big giant solar power plant.
Yeah, yeah, but the way like Klamath is doing it, a couple hundred acres here and there, as opposed to like what Vegas has
I
done with
think I
that
understand. You're saying like you can build up on a wind, a
of
wind plant.
sorts.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
nuclear, it takes a lot more material and resources to build the initial, but the operating costs are lower. It is more consistent. It's more reliable. It is cheaper and it's safer than even like solar and wind.
Yeah.
You know,
so I was reading to that point about cheaper or not, or actually there's some companies coming online. One of
mhm.
them being Kronos, right? If we're going to give shout outs or whatever. um, they're actually working on a micro reactor
Yeah.
type setup where it's the size of a 40-foot trailer on a semi truck, right? So you can scale those up.
Mhm.
So
I
you can start with one and then add three more as it goes without even having to take one offline, which is pretty cool.
I have read about that, and you're right. So that's the newer technology. I think
Right.
historically, for the previous generations of nuclear, it was these massive facilities
Right.
that required a lot of concrete, a lot of steel, and I think that's what it was. The newer generation, the newer tech of nuclear is honestly, it's a lot better than the older stuff.
Yeah.
They're it is you can get more power, smaller unit, it's safer, it's more contained, it's more modular, right? You could
Yeah.
yeah, and I
I
know there's a lot more talk about bringing more nuclear energy online too across the country.
it's funny because I think of a couple different things, like the amount of like plastic used in like a wind farm, for example, for wind
Yeah,
turbines,
yeah,
astronomical, right?
Yeah.
Now,
yeah.
there are a lot of resources used for nuclear, but it's not necessarily like heavy earth materials, other than, of course, the uranium. And it's not a lot of pollutant. Now, what I will say that nuclear we haven't quite fully figured out in a sense is like how to store the waste. Essentially, when the rods are done, they're waste, and some of them can stay radioactive for like 100,000 years. So essentially what we do is like we build facilities in the desert and we put them in the desert and we have signs. And I've even read that we're trying to figure out how to let future generations know, like, don't come in here because we don't think they'll speak English. So it's like, do we put like a skull and crossbones or like death signs? Like, don't come here because for 100,000 years, it's going to be bad. And I think that's one thing, and I'll go to you, Danny, but that's one thing that is scary about it is that, like, Chernobyl, for example, you can't go like that area is essentially off limits for years, and our kids generation, our grandkids generation will never be able to live there, right? Now, when you have the size and scale of the earth, it doesn't really matter, but that's something that's scary that we just like said no, you can never live here. So Danny, what are you thinking?
Here's what I'll say. Because me and my kids like to get into the weird, wild side of YouTube, there's a lot of people that try to break into Chernobyl and go exploring.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And they've actually done quite a bit of research and stuff as of lately, and that area is shrinking at a much more rapid rate than
Yeah.
they understood.
Sure.
First off, the next thing I'll say is with these reactors, all the way back to the Oak Ridge Laboratories in 1943, this MSR technology has been around. And if we had stayed the course with that MSR stuff, we'd probably have one in every town, no matter the size of the town.
Yeah.
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 Across the country. It wouldn't, because for a couple reasons, that technology can burn through that stored material that you're talking about, right? It can use that as fuel. For another thing is it's safer because of the passive, like, so with Fukushima, with Chernobyl, with 3 Mile Island, those were all meltdown events, right?
Right.
Where the reactor core stopped getting the coolant and then the temperature skyrocketed out of control and started a meltdown, right? Well, with this MSR technology, I spent way longer than a normal person reading about this technology because I think it's super cool.
Yeah.
Is it has a passive containment system. So anything goes wrong in the system, there's a plug down at the bottom that when anything stops, let's say power goes offline or whatever, that plug liquefies and then the whole system drains down into a contained bottom where it solidifies back into a salt block in a contained vessel that they can safely extract and then reliquefy and put back into the system after whatever problem has been repaired.
So, okay, you clearly want to talk about this MSR.
I
So,
d- it's it's all right.
start from the beginning. Like, explain to people who don't understand, like, what is
Yeah.
MSR? Like, I know you kind of talked about like ways to prevent a disaster, but like, what is it? How does it produce energy? We want to understand it. Let's go into that a little bit.
Yeah. Okay. So it was successfully operated from 65 to 69, 1965 to
What was
1969.
successfully operated?
The Molten Salt Reactor Experiment,
Okay.
MSRE, at
MSR.
Oak Ridge National Laboratory, right, from 65 to 69. It was using uranium-233 from thorium, and it was terminated in 69 by Milton Shaw, who was the director of the development and testing. They favored liquid metal fast breeder reactor over thermal MSR because it was of greater interest for military applications at that time.
Yeah.
Right. Then they have a whole paragraph that says it's notable that it wasn't rejected solely for its inability to produce weapons grade plutonium. Not solely. It
Yeah.
was probably the largest factor. I'll say it that way. But now we're getting back into that because, clean, stable, long-term development and the ability to consume nuclear waste instead of producing
Right.
nuclear waste, right? So that's the whole thing behind it, which is pretty cool.
Mm.
I was trying to get to the fact sheet. I had it pulled up, and then because I'm old and computers are hard.
You're not that old.
I know, but the kids that I work with say that I'm old because I'm always like this dang thing.
So it's a type of, while you're looking at that, it's part of the nuclear reactor world, just a different coolant system or like a safety system.
Different coolant system, different safety system, different reactor core, and there's a few other. I was trying to find a good. I'll find one and then send it to you. But a good breakdown of
Sure.
the different types of it.
Yeah.
Um,
So
As far
go ahead, Troy.
go
Sorry.
ahead.
I was going to say, as far as Chernobyl, there's animals and plants are starting to come back and grow in that area
yeah.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So and the sicknesses, the diseases, the cancers, and all of that within those plants and animals are nearly close to what was predicted would be.
I want to get into that because I was reading this article by Forbes. So not just like a crazy right-wing article, It's by Forbes from Michael Schellenberger. And the article is titled, "It Sounds Crazy, but Fukushima, Chernobyl, and 3 Mile Island show why nuclear is inherently safe." Now, this was written in 2019, so it's, decently old. But I'm going to read a couple quotes here. By now, this is Helen Haldecott wrote this in the New York Times, and he's quoting her. "By now, close to 1 million people have died of causes linked to the Chernobyl disaster. This is far exceeding Chernobyl. Fukushima could far exceed Chernobyl in terms of effects on public health." So Fukushima was in 2011. Chernobyl was in 1986. So further, this is hilarious. Further into the article, he says, "By now, 8 years after Fukushima, the best available science clearly shows that Caldecott's estimate of number of people killed by nuclear accidents was off by 1 million. And it's funny because her original quote was about 1 million people. "Radiation from Chernobyl will kill at most 200 people, while the radiation from Fukushima and 3 Mile Island will kill 0 people." And the last thing I'll read, "In other words, the main lesson that should be drawn from the worst nuclear accidents is that nuclear energy has always been inherently safe." And that's not what you learn, right? Like, don't get me wrong, you still probably shouldn't go walking around Chernobyl, just like hanging out inside by the elephant's foot or whatever. You could still get cancer, you could still die, you could still whatever. But we do a really good job as humanity of containing these things, even in the worst disasters. So Troy, I'll throw it to you. Have you ever seen, what is that movie? It's like the Chernobyl Diaries or something. It's like a found footage horror movie.
So. Yeah, a long time ago. So go ahead, finish your question.
Anyways, that I can't tell if it's like propaganda from media, politicians, or just like entertainment, but like who would have come into this conversation knowing that, like, even up until this point, most people have been like, yeah, well, Bradley, but still hundreds of thousands of people have died. No, hundreds of people have died.
Yeah.
And that's sad.
Yeah, like
people die from
200.
driving.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's sad,
people
but
die from
hundreds
driving
of
and
people.
It's more dangerous to commute to work.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, hundreds of people die building bridges. Hundreds of people die building whatever. And it's super safe.
To your point, Brad, go ahead. Sorry, Troy.
Yeah, you're fine. As far as the entertainment, you were talking about The Simpsons earlier and the Chernobyl Diaries. Hollywood at its core, they are drama queens. They make everything far more dramatic than what
Yeah.
it really absolutely is. And that's what like the Chernobyl Diaries is. They're taking something that may not be as bad as what
Right.
thought could have been and turned it into this whole horror film.
Yeah.
This scary movie thing. I think I saw half of it. I'm like, this is stupid, and turned it off. But they just make everything more dramatic. Drama. A lot of people react to drama
Sure.
and start, you know. But yeah, that's so.
Well, I find it funny, right? It's like what is acceptable? Well, we don't want to share a car with anybody. We don't like riding the bus. Trains, a lot of people don't like them, right? So we'll accept the possibility of possibly dying at maybe a 38% increase just so that we can listen to our own music and go exactly where we want to go versus take something that's like a safer mode of transportation
Right.
just for convenience factor, right? And everybody wants more electronics in their house because they want to do less things, right? They want a self-driving car. We talked about that, right?
Yeah.
They
Tesla
they
robot.
want to go where they want to go, but they don't necessarily want to do the things that you have to do to get to where you want to go. People want to be
Yeah, I think that's the point is like I have no problem with people wanting access to luxuries, or people having access to driving their car. Like it's not people like us who are complaining about extra cars on the road. It's
right.
people who aren't like us who are saying we want less of these things, but they don't want the solution. It reminds me of, okay, I think it's something like 40,000 people a year die in car accidents, right? Now, in self-driving
I think that's just in the U.S.
Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah. You're
worldwide,
right. In the
it's like
US.
200 something.
Self-driving cars have produced, I think, one accident or one
Hmm.
fatal accident, and it was found to be from the driver of the non-self-driving car. The government or local governments would rather have 40,000 deaths in the United States made by humans than, let's say, 100 made by self-driving cars. And it's crazy to think about because like you think about it, you're like, I don't want a bunch of self-driving cars on the road and I get run over. You don't, but you're okay with
You
a
won't.
regular person running you
Yeah.
over at a rate of 100 times more.
Right. You think
That's-
about like DUIs and impaired motorist deaths, right? Are responsible for like it's like 70 something percent
Yeah.
of all vehicular deaths are caused by a chemical impairment, whether it be prescribed or non-prescribed, right? Um, so yeah, essentially what we're saying is we would rather we would rather die by the hand of someone
Right.
than
Than by a computer.
a tenth of that
Yes.
out of our control.
Yes.
We'd rather
It's-
be the cause.
It's a similar thing with gun control. You hear all these states and politicians trying to enact
my
more
goodness.
restrictive gun, because guns kill people. But what they don't realize is the amount of lives being saved when people use guns in a defensive manner.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Or when everybody's trained on how to use them and be safe with them, right?
exactly.
It all comes back to guns, people. That's our point.
Yeah. Make sure you get some Sasquatch gun oil.
Yeah, there it is.
Keep it clean and effective.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, anyways, I think the point is like the more you look like this is just stuff that we're learning every week, Dan, is like the more we learn and like we get ready for our next session is like, okay, some of the stuff we talk about is crazy, like Sasquatch or the
Aliens in Mount Shasta.
Yeah, like that. Okay. Right, that's fine. But
Marians.
like when you look at nuclear, you just look up some like government data, well documented data, and you find out like not a lot of people have died. Like more people die
Yeah.
of natural causes than, during this time.
Right. It's funny. So, like reading about these MSRs, right? They're way safer than the other ones. We're talking about taking an already safer process. Now, here's one thing I'll say, right? Safer because why? Well, driving is dangerous because almost a percentage of the population, right? Ratio, there's a lot of people
Right.
driving. So your risk goes up when more people are doing that thing,
Yeah.
right? Well, there's percentage wise, 8% of the electricity made is from nuclear power, right? So that's a small, if 90% of the power was made by nuclear power, meaning there was 100 times more
Right.
nuclear power plants out there, would we see an uptick in the deaths from it, right? And I think that's what's scary, but they're not looking at it from a logical lens. They're not comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges.
Absolutely.
It's an emotional
Yeah,
lens,
they're
a
comparing
fear-based
oranges
lens.
to hammers, right? Like they're
Yeah.
like, all right, so a couple of people died from this one thing because of something that we actually kind of caused. We have a safer one that definitely won't kill anybody, but you can't make a bomb out of it.
Yeah.
Should we do it? And they're like, no, definitely not. It's too dangerous.
I like you talked about like the military power of nuclear energy, and I'll say this: this is something I learned is I live in Colorado, and in the Colorado mountains, the Rocky Mountains by us has I think one of the top 3 deposits of uranium in the world, and like if you don't understand it, that seems scary, But a funny thing is, we actually have like the 4th or 3rd lowest out of all the states in the U.S. Cancer rates for lung cancer and other cancers in the world, or in the U.S. I should say. So we have like all this uranium, but like you have to take it out and you have to produce it and you have to make it radioactive. So we're okay, right? Ukraine has a lot of uranium, and somewhere else in the world, I can't remember it, but
Russia does too.
yeah. So that general area in Asia, in Europe, but we have it here too. And people like, we're afraid of these things. And I don't know, Dan, maybe you're thinking it's like someone somewhere planted this idea and it just kind of got rolling. And it reminds me of like our conversation about how Republicans are racist, right? Like in the 1960s, it was the Democrats in the South, and they were losing. And they realized like that Jim Crow laws and things weren't working. So they just said, you guys are racist. And everyone just started believing it.
Yeah,
right?
And everyone was like, yeah,
Yeah.
it's got to be them. Those guys.
It kind of reminds me of that. So do you think it's like from the 1950s when we moved on that people are like, this isn't going to work? Or like, I still want to go back to
You know what
like,
I think it is?
What?
I think it's guilty by association, right?
How so?
If you had a family member that was killed by a car, right? You're like, I don't drive cars, I drive trucks. They don't kill people.
Right.
I know someone that was killed by a car, right? Nuclear bomb.
Yeah.
Dropped twice.
Yeah.
Killed lots of people. You want to make electricity with those things? You're out of your mind.
I mean, here's the thing, though. Sorry, go ahead, Troy.
Iran conflict, right? Isn't that the kind of the premise of the Iran conflict going on now?
How so?
Yeah, we don't want them. We don't want them to have nuclear energy so that they don't make nuclear bombs, right?
Bombs, yeah.
Yeah. I like, but the thing is, like, the statistical chances that
right, why wouldn't you champion the one that doesn't make the bombs?
Right. The statistical chances that you meet someone who is affected negatively by nuclear power is like you're more likely to get possessed by a demon than that. You know, like
you're right. There's a lot more stories of people being possessed by demons, out there on the internet and such, and Hollywood videos than
even in real life.
Yeah,
even just on the internet.
Than dying from nuclear. I will say though, on that note, Bradley. So speaking of nuclear weapons, outside of Vegas in the 50s, they did nuclear weapons testing, and Vegas had developed a an attraction where people could go to Vegas and watch the mushroom cloud form from a nuclear explosion out on the horizon. Well, growing up in southern Utah, the wind patterns blew that radiation, and there was a heightened level of sicknesses in the southern Utah area that I heard about.
From weapons, from
That
weapons,
Yeah.
that was
not
from
from
weapons, though. Yeah,
right. So
exactly.
yes,
That
Yeah,
also
it's
but
sounds
really
like a bad
easy.
practice. I'm just like,
yeah,
I don't know anything about it, but based on what you said, sounds like a bad idea.
yeah. They
Yes, it's
still
a
in
very
a
bad
town
idea.
called Island. Oh gosh, I forget the. It's where Creech Air Force Base is. I forget the name of the town. They still have Geiger counters
Oh yeah,
out in
it's
the
Indian
city.
Springs.
Indian Springs, that's it. Yeah, next to the post office and some of the government buildings. But yeah, it was just seeing pictures. Like you'd see fallout or mushroom clouds out from Vegas off in the distance over the horizon. It's kind of cool.
Interesting.
Obviously I wasn't there, but yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Yeah, 96 was supposed to be the last time we tested one.
Yeah, they haven't tested one in the 21st century. The U.S. hasn't.
Sure, we haven't.
Yeah, sure. As far as nuclear waste, like, the whole thought was, bury it in the mountains, Yucca Mountain, and other
Yeah.
places. I know some facilities have just kind of contained it on site. What if we were to just launch it into space?
mm.
Like towards Jupiter or
You
something?
just
I don't
you just brought up like 20 different horror movies that
Yeah.
end the
No.
existence of humanity by launching space garbage into space. That's
But,
probably
I
the
mean,
most expensive way
I
to
was
get
gonna
rid
say
of
it
it. Why
sounds
wouldn't
really
we just
expensive.
but at least the radiation, that fear of it would be gone.
But here's the
and the
thing.
Well,
waste.
why don't we just use that to make more electricity in the MSR reactor?
Assuming the MSR doesn't become a thing. Yeah.
It
But
doesn't, either way, it doesn't matter because the world is so much bigger than we think it is.
yeah.
Like
I agree.
people worry about like dumps, like garbage dumps. Like like landfills, we're going to run out of room. Anyone who's driven across the United States knows that's not true, right? Like you can drive for 12 straight hours through the West and not see anything,
Unless you drive through California and then you get it for 30 miles straight.
Get what for 30 miles straight?
Trash from a
Oh,
landfill.
but
Yeah,
even
especially the north south in
Yeah.
California. Yeah.
like we could keep doing landfills forever essentially. Like there's been people who've studied landfills and like they're actually really good science and you can use
Hmm.
them to produce gas,
Hmm.
like
And
natural,
power.
yeah, gas
Yep.
and natural
Yep.
power.
Yep.
Well, also
Go ahead.
NASA in Florida burned through an entire landfill. They created a plasma furnace and burned landfill material to generate power, and it worked great. I don't know why they quit. The only thing that came out of the bottom was inert carbon. Like,
Which you could use for asphalt, to repair roads or lay down new roads.
yeah,
Which
Yeah.
Sasquatch
yes.
gun oil breaks down. But anyways, I think it's like we have all these problems, and nuclear waste is probably the biggest because it's a time problem more than a space problem. And by space I mean like size, right? Like the amount of space it
Yeah.
takes up.
Footprint wise.
Yeah. So, but it like it's such a small amount. We could be doing this like for hundreds and hundreds of years before we even have to consider like anything, and it's probably even longer than that. And that's what gets me interested in this because we don't understand it. And Troy, before we were talking, like before we were recording, you're like, yeah, cancer can be an issue. In this article it says, what about cancer? In 2065, there may be 16,000
Yeah.
thyroid cancers. To date, there have been 6,000. Since thyroid cancer has a mortality rate of just 1%, it's an easy cancer to treat. Expected deaths may be 160. So if you think about that, in 80 years since the Chernobyl disaster, there may be a total of 16,000 maybe thyroid cancers. In 80 years, 160 people may die from thyroid cancer. I don't know about you, if like in 80 years, most people will be dead regardless, since the average human life is about
It's about
73 to
80.
76. So most people are dead anyways, right? So the more we look into this, the more it's like, it's just, you're scared of like a nuclear meltdown. That's really it, right?
It's fear. You're letting fear control you, though, at that point.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah, we talked about it before. The amount of deaths you talked about with the thyroid cancer, it's more dangerous to drive to work every day.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
but it is still just a fear based. These people are reacting to the potential fear. And that was with older technology. With the newer nuclear technology that's coming out, those cancer risks are probably even lower than what that article stated.
Oh, sure. That's a good point.
You
yeah.
know? Yeah.
I'd say just one refute to that point is it's not necessarily newer technology.
I was
It's
thinking
old technology that's been proven, re-implemented in a different factor form. It's like saying my laptop is not a desktop computer, even though I'm using it on the desktop.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm doing all of the same things you would do with the desktop, but now the monitor's connected.
Yeah.
Like,
but that Soviet one, the Chernobyl, it was a poorly designed one too, as well. After the event,
yeah,
so,
there was lots of safety factors that were not implemented that should have been.
Maybe, not newer technology, but maybe an American designed one.
But again, it was politics that drove that. They wanted the timeline. Yeah. They were like, it's taking too long, right? And then they were like, no, it's too expensive and it's taking too long. You're doing it wrong. You're dead. Put this guy in there, right? So they were just like they just kept changing people out, right? This next guy, instead of like having a team of people that can then check each other as they go, they're just, nope, next guy. Yeah. Now you do it.
And probably most of those people knew nothing about nuclear energy and how to design a nuclear power plant.
Yeah, or they were, in some quasi-related field.
Yeah, exactly.
And
you worked one office over, you're going.
The thing is, it's not just like the experts. It's like regular people and politicians. Like the politicians aren't like energy experts or nuclear scientists. They're politicians, they're like by definition experts in nothing. And that's where it's like they're the ones who kind of like tell us what to think and what to believe. But you read like 3 articles on it, and not just, like I said, not like crazy right-wing Glenn Beck articles, like the data that I had around the death rates from Our World in Data from Oxford. Okay.
Yeah. Earlier, you were talking about how Germany got rid of all their nuclear and they kind of went solar and wind. And France was the opposite. France, they have majority nuclear power for their country. How many nuclear power accidents, incidents, disasters have you heard of in France?
None.
I've never heard of one.
Yeah.
So.
Exactly. Meanwhile, Germany adopting all the solar and wind, they're having electrical issues.
Of course,
they're having inconsistent.
Yeah, and those freaking
it's expensive.
Those wind generators burn down, and then the amount of contamination from that soil around there, from all of the petroleum products leaking out of it and being all over the ground, like it's pretty bad.
It's affected their economic industrial base too, because a lot of those industries, those companies are relocating outside of Germany because they don't have that consistent power anymore.
Right.
So it's affecting their economy as a whole too.
Oh yeah. I mean, and I'm just gonna say it: solar kills or wind kills more birds than anything else.
Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
If I was France, I'd build 10 more and then sell it.
Yeah.
Okay.
Utah's planning on building a nuclear facility in Utah to sell that extra energy to California.
Ooh, California's another one of those places where their grid is just all messed up, right? And it shouldn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be that way.
Yeah, which brings an interesting point. I want to see these micro reactors on a bullet train east to west, man.
just as long as it's not built by
But
California.
I was gonna say then you have to get into California trying to build a train and
Nah, you could get on in the middle. It's fine.
Do you guys want to keep going because we're almost out of time?
I mean, I don't
Uh,
know.
yeah, let's
Sure.
go so we can wrap it up.
Okay, let's wrap it up and then we'll talk after. So we're pretty much out of time. To close us out, my question is this. What do you think is the future of nuclear power? And what I mean by that is, do you think that we'll end up getting more? Like, will we learn? Will the politicians get in the way? Will we try to go down the solar wind route? So, Dan, I'll start with you and then I'll go to you, Troy. What do you think is going to be our future for the US, for the world, etc.?
Micro reactors.
That's what you think. This is what you
Yeah.
think is going to happen or what you want
Yes.
to happen?
Both.
Okay.
I think
Explain.
it's going to happen, and I want it to happen. Here's why, right? If we truly cared about if they really wanted to go after and do electric cars and stuff, right? And we did micro reactors in every town everywhere, and this MSR stuff is exactly what they say it is, right? And we jumped that hurdle. Um, the timelines that they're projecting on all of these different ones, like the World Nuclear News, talk about nano. There's like tons of different micro reactor, not tons. There's like 8 different micro reactor companies out there that are trying to bring these micro reactors online because of the modular design of them, right?
Yeah.
Mhm.
So, um, we're not in a position where we need less electricity, right? They want AI to come online. They want these big cloud storage databases.
Right.
Everybody wants to I'll just put it in the cloud, right? I hear people say that and it drives me insane, but whatever. We're not going to have less electrical things in our house,
Nope.
right? We need lights. There's a lot of electric ranges that are favorable over gas, even though I like gas ranges. I think that we're going to see, after a few hurdles, political hurdles that they wrote in, once they can prove that you cannot make weapons grade material out of them, because it's really a red tape issue.
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
It's
The government doesn't want more of these, but once they we'll say, how do I say this? Once they let the people with the right money, the money that they're looking for, that are stopping this from happening, once that issue or that hurdle gets overtaken, then we'll see a proliferation of all these micro reactors come up in all these towns, because once our power grid is bolstered, that's better for national security and all around.
Yeah.
Like, people are,
Yeah.
just if they had microgrids all across California instead of tens of thousands or like hundreds thousand miles of cables stretching back and forth that are susceptible to wind and cause forest fires and all this other craziness, not to mention the upkeep of all of the lines that span the country. And instead of having these giant spans of power lines, you can go to just power at the source at all these different places. That's why I think it'll be better, because of the lowering the cost of maintenance and upkeep.
All right.
Where
it's
a micro reactor might cost more initially if you buy, this kind of thing that requires less maintenance over your overall maintenance cost over the age of it.
Yeah.
Doesn't rise exponentially, where it does with power lines, because of degradation and all
Sure.
the stuff that goes along with it. You could reap the benefits in quite a few different areas. But it just comes down to what we're talking about is optics, right?
Yeah.
Everybody's been scared for 50 years that you're going to grow a third eye and all your fish will be
Yeah.
radioactive. whereas that's not the reality.
Troy, what about
You,
you? What
you
were you
were you
thinking?
were talking about that modular reactor. Have you guys seen pictures of Edison's DC infrastructure? What he was trying to implement?
I
So
don't think
Yeah,
DC,
so.
right?
basically batteries everywhere.
Well, it wasn't just batteries, it was power generation on every block, but it was going to be
Yeah,
pole. And DC being direct, you had cables going every which direction,
Yeah.
and DC couldn't send power very far. So, like the initial, eh, what the cities would have looked like, you would have seen a coal power plant on every block producing electricity with cables going every which direction to provide power for every home. It was so cumbersome.
Yeah.
It was so inefficient.
Yeah.
And then Tesla came out with the AC, and that allowed it to go further distances,
Yeah.
and go back and forth, alternating. Um, but you were talking to Dan that there would be, with the AI and the data centers, and like those are energy hogs. And like, the demand for energy is going to go up significantly as the cities,
yeah,
as the states, as the country grows. More homes are going to be built, more buildings, more industry, more, solar and wind can only provide so much.
Yeah.
So there has to be a solution, an alternative, because solar and wind's not going to be that.
What do
It's a
you think
bridge.
what do you think it'll be, Troy?
I think it'll be nuke. There's nothing on the earth that provides energy that's as energy dense as nuclear power is.
Yeah.
The amount of energy it produces from the amount of material it needs, or the amount of fuel it needs to produce that energy, is the most dense. And it just makes sense to use the most dense
Yeah.
energy options out there. Solar and wind are some of the least dense energy.
Yeah.
Um,
I think
you know,
I think density is a good term here because I think of like wind or solar, I should say. And Danny, if I'm not mistaken, the house behind you, do they have solar panels on their roof? The one we can
I'm
see?
surrounded by people that have solar panels
Okay.
on their
yeah.
roof.
So when I was thinking of this, I was like, in the end, it would be cool to have solar panels. The thing is, it takes about anywhere between 6 and 10 years to pay off the cost through the savings of solar, or through the savings of your energy and your monthly energy bill. And so if it's a long-term home, you can be like, okay, maybe I can afford that. Maybe that's a long-term investment. Then you have to think about replacing the panels, maintenance, etc., right? So I think about that, and I think of like all the houses around you have solar. Here's the thing though, is the density of like population happens usually in big cities, right? And we complain about this all the time, like big cities in Illinois or big cities in Oregon, big cities in Colorado kind of control the whole state, right? Like if you go to Colorado, a lot of the people in landmass are Republican or conservative, but most of the people are jam packed into Denver,
Denver.
right? And the same way in Illinois with Chicago, in Oregon with Portland, through Klamath Falls, you feel that effects. That's the thing, that solar can't get that sort of density, right? You can't, like,
Right.
even if you had every building producing solar energy in a big city, there's too many people because you have
Hmm.
100 people in one building.
Hmm.
Now, if everyone
Hmm.
was in small houses like our houses, right, and that was our density level, then we'd be okay. So for me, it's like, that's why it's like solar is just, it's more personal and to offset a little bit of the grid, but it's not necessarily very practical. So I don't think solar, I don't think wind will do it. What I think's going to happen is we're just going to keep burning coal and oil.
Yeah.
And like, I don't
Yeah.
think, I think like you said, Danny, the optics, no one wants a nuclear facility in their town. Like even
I
if
do.
I
I
get
would.
that we do, but you go to Colorado Springs, which is a relatively conservative place, 80% of the people will say, "No, I don't want a nuclear facility next to my house," you know?
Is that coal power plant still online downtown though?
Where?
In Colorado Springs?
Oh, I don't know. I drive by it all the time and I don't know if it's online or
Because it
not.
It was when I was living there. So they're not happy having a nuclear power plant in your own town,
Right.
but they're more than happy having a coal power plant, spewing ash
Yeah.
and all that smoke and
Yeah.
And then when it
settling
rains,
on
all that
everything.
stuff gets all over your windshield, and you
Yeah.
can't
Yeah.
get it cleaned off.
And it was right downtown, like right in the middle of the city too. I mean, there's
No, I know what
neighborhoods
you're
and-
talking about. I don't know
Yeah,
if it's
and-
online, but I get your point. Like, I would rather have like dirt and ash fall over me than like the
That
1 in
causes
10,000
actual
chance that
health
there's
issues.
a meltdown, you know?
Yeah.
So that's what I think's going to happen. I think we'll just keep the path. Coal,
Until we run out of coal and oil. Yeah.
fossil fuels, whatever we have. I think that we're going to spend a lot of money on wind and solar. And you even see like President Donald Trump has stopped, we talked about this last week, but has stopped some of the grants, like the $7,500 grant for electric cars, which
He's a proponent of nuclear power too.
sure. But the thing about electric cars is you plug them in and it's just from coal anyways, right?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
like you get most of your electricity through coal. So like, sure, the car itself doesn't give,
It
go
still
ahead.
has to be
Check
mined,
this
though,
out.
the lithium and everything. Yeah.
I'm sure that you got this call too, Troy, a couple years back, like 3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now. But who's the power company there?
Pacific Power.
Yeah, PP&L, right?
Yeah. I don't know. Mel pays the bill.
Pacific Power and Light or something like that.
Yeah. Sure.
So I get this phone call, right? And here's what's hilarious about it. I get this phone call. Hello. And it's like, hey, do you have a minute? And I'm like, yeah, sure. So he's like, would you like to pay? It was something like, it was a lot more, like 70 something cents more for power stuff. Like not 70 cents on your bill, but like it would have been
Per like terawatt hours
$50
or per
or
hour
more.
or something.
Yeah.
Kilowatt.
So I'm like, well, walk me through this math, right? I went and got my power bill. They were not prepared for the phone call they made.
For Dan being Dan.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm like, all right, walk me through this, right? And so he does. And I'm like, okay, so now let's say if I was to get this, how do you ensure? Because what their whole spiel was, would you pay a little bit more money to ensure that you have access to clean energy power? And I'm like what? Solar and wind? And he's like, yeah, local solar and wind power. And I was like, so you're going to run new power lines to my house? And he's like, well, what do you mean? I'm like, how do you know that those electrons that are being produced by the solar panels are the ones I'm using in my toaster right now?
Right.
And he's like, well, what do you mean? He's like, when you pay the fee. And I'm like, paying the fee does not get electrons that are produced from the solar farm to my outlet.
Yeah.
And I was like, who is your supervisor? Put him on the phone. This is insane.
So
And
some
like, so
poor
this-
guy who works at the power company.
I know you remember this conversation
Yes.
that we had. And so I'm like, all right. So I get his boss on the phone and I'm like, so tell me how paying this amount of money means that those are the electrons that I'm going to use, unless you're dropping new lines. I said, because my neighbor has solar power on his roof, and that's going out to the grid, right? And he's like, yeah. And I said, okay, but also the power company is putting power out into the grid, right? And he's like, yeah. And I'm like, right, those are the same lines. So you want to charge me more money to continue to use the same power that's coming to my house? How can
Same
you?
infrastructure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the guy, like, he was like getting upset, and I was like, you should be like ashamed that you're trying to fleece people. That's horrendous. I was like, because I can't get on Google and be like, what other power company can I get power from?
Right. Yeah.
Who else
Yeah,
can I
yeah.
pay money to
Yeah.
get? Like, you can
There's usually
go
only
to a
one option.
Sinclair, you can go to a Circle K, you can go to a Shell gas. If you like Shell
Yeah.
gas and you're convinced that Shell gas gets you 5 miles more per tank, right? You can go pay 30 cents more a gallon. and buy expensive designer shell gas instead of going to like
The
Citgo,
Gucci of gasoline.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah, my Prada gasoline gets me 5 miles more to the gallon, and my injectors are happy.
And it's
Um,
from a clean gas source.
Yeah, okay. You're gonna
I-
make me say bad words, and I don't want to do that.
Troy.
So on that note, though, Dan, I had something similar in Colorado. Actually, when we moved in, the power bill, I forget who the company was. They sent me a bill asking if we wanted to subscribe to wind blocks from the wind turbines that they were building in eastern Colorado.
I'd rather pay for cow farts.
Yeah. And so I said no, because it was like, it's just going to jack up my price.
No,
and how do I
yeah.
know if it's going to actually come from the wind or not? And, but yeah, I had that in Colorado. I don't recall that here in Oregon, though.
That's funny.
It did go up when they removed that hydroelectric dam. They removed the John C. Boyle Reservoir. Did you know that?
Yeah. That was the cleanest, and they used money from the 50s to build that, still producing more power, more stable power.
Yeah.
Dude, don't
get Danny started. I've had so many phone calls with him about that.
They released that water to the ocean at an area in the dry, deserty mountains where it needed water storage. Now you're going to see some massive fires in that area in a couple of years when all of those plants that relied on the water die off. And,
is there an option where you can get it cheaper if you use dirtier? Like I'll go for the dirt cheap. I'll just use the really bad dirty stuff. Well, can my electric bill go down if I only use coal? That's what I would want to do if I had that option. Like, give me the dirt cheap stuff, you know? Like I'll take the dirtiest. You get everyone else to take the wind and solar. And I think that's a good time to wrap it up. I think that in the end, if you learn some, and I'm going to put the links to some of the articles, and you'll see it's not like crazy, like crazy conspiracy, like real organizations, universities. This information that's out there says that nuclear is an option, but I don't think we're going to get there because no one wants to live next to one.
I think we're going to get there.
Danny thinks we're going to get there.
They want to use their computers so much. Dude, we walked into Sam's Club the other day. They got a 100-inch TV for sale. Mm-hmm. And like some dude was like, well, how do I get it into my truck? And like, like TVs are so big now that whatever car you went to the store in, you can't buy 55 gallons of peanut butter and a 100-inch TV in the same trip because you don't have a big enough truck.
I gotta buy a car to get to pick up the TV. But if it's electric, it's fine because electric does nothing.
I want to see the day where people are holding the TV on top of their car. Like, when you see a mattress once in a while back home in Chicago, they're holding a mattress on top, right? There's like 8 dudes in a Hyundai Sonata, like holding the mattress on top. I want to see a TV.
All right, that's all we got today. We are Sasquatch Talk from Sasquatch Gun Oil. Troy right there's got some oil. If you go to sasquatchgunoil.org, we now sell more than oil. So we're adding new products every day. I think we have some other type of kits. We have some bullets. We're going to get ammunition on there, but we have some bullets for reloading right now on the website. So check out sasquatchgunoil.org. The oil is great for cleaning, Dan.
Some black powder stuff too, right?
Yep.
And soon we're going to have some firearms.
Soon we'll have firearms. We're going to get there within the next few days, next few weeks. We're adding more and more stuff, so check out our website. In the meantime, we're here for your weekly entertainment to talk crazy stuff. And let's be honest, some rational stuff this week. We were very rational.
Oof.
Most of the time.
Scary territory.
Most of the time.
Let's go with quasi-rational.
Yeah. We were like pretty rational. It got off the rails a little bit, but we were good. We were on our best behavior. That's all we got. Adios.